Delighted to see so many of you here this evening. Thank you very much for coming to our event on careers in sustainability and social responsibility. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Dave Gorman. I'm Director for Social Responsibility and Sustainability at the University. Delighted to host this. This is one of a series of events that our department runs, and this time we've been partnering up with, as you can see, the university's careers service and with our development and alumni service, so we're delighted to do that. The Carbon Trust got back in touch with me to say that they're currently advertising a job, so if you want to know more about that, either go to the Carbon Trust, or I have a very small number of Twitter followers, and I know what the job is, so come and tweet me, and then follow me, and then I'll tell you. I think we've got a really great set of speakers lined up for you, so just in a moment I'm going to invite Sir Geoff Palmer to come and talk, and I'll tell you who he is in a second. And the format for the evening is, once we've heard from Geoff, we'll have a panel of 4 speakers, and I'll ask them a series of questions, and then once we've done that, we'll open up to yourselves. And again, Geoff will join us at that point. So we had a good opportunity to hear from people who are active in the field of social responsibility and sustainability, and you'll get your chance to ask some questions as well. So hopefully we can have a nice interactive session. So what we want to do tonight is we want to give you some insight into the career opportunities in social responsibility and sustainability. And we want to share with you some people who are active in this field and some of their insights, some of their experience. And we want to inspire you as well. I mean, there wasn't an event like this when I was getting involved. I wish there had been. So hopefully by the end of the evening, you'll feel inspired and you'll be looking forward to doing more in this area. So without too much further ado, can I just introduce you to our keynote speaker, Sir Geoff Palmer, MBE, who's Professor Emeritus at Heriot-Watt University. Sir Geoff is the first, and I think still only, black professor in Scotland. And Geoff's an expert in grain science. And it says here that he's the inventor of the barley abrasion process, which I think sounds wonderful. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm pretty sure it involves whiskey at some stage. But not only is he's a world-renowned grain scientist, he's also very active in the area of human rights. And that's for what he got his knighthood for. And there's a great picture, if you haven't seen it online already, of Sir Geoff holding up a very nice glass of whiskey to celebrate that. And what we've asked him to do is just reflect upon his experience, both as a scientist, but also as an active human rights campaigner. And he's got, I'll let him tell you more about his books as well, but one of them is now on my Amazon list. So without any further ado from me, can I hand over to Sir Geoff? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. Can you hear me? Yes. Right. As soon as I turned round, I didn't know how many people were behind me. And in 30 years of teaching at the Heriot-Watt, I don't think I've seen this many students at once in a lecture. So, this is wonderful. At the end of my career, I have a sort of a full house. At the Heriot-Watt, I used to notice 3 or 4 students, and you never saw the 3 or 4 of them together because they were taking notes for each other. However, thanks for the introduction. And for example, in order to start at the end of my lecture rather than start at the beginning, I've just, today, I think it was Upper Street, I had a meeting in Ford Street behind John Lewis. It was for an organisation called Edinburgh and Lothian Equality Council. It's one of the oldest organisations to do with equality in Edinburgh. It's over 40 years old. In fact, I was at the beginning. And this organisation is funded by Edinburgh Council. And the council has decided, I think, on Tuesday last week, to say that they're going to remove the funding from this organisation, which has caused great shock to all of us who are in that organisation. I'm the honorary president, and the organisation is very diverse. We have people from all over the world in it. So we had an emergency general meeting today, an emergency board meeting, in order to deal with the council. Now, what is interesting in that, I'm on the board, but I'm not an elected board member. I've had to handle all the correspondence, dozens of emails from the council, dealing with officers in the council, politicians in the council. And why me? Because you see all the people in the council, some of them are graduates, but had no scientific training. And it's come down to scientific training because the council officers know that organizations, whether it's a hospital or whether it's just an ordinary little organizations like that, you have to deal with the correspondence. And I'll just tell you 2 incidents of all this, which is still important and we're trying to help our survival. I was on the phone just coming out the toilet when I was asked to come in because I was issuing instructions. And what it is was that the council asks for an assessment of the work done over the last year. But the council says they will determine the method. They determine the method, and they said they will select 2 of the reviewers. We can select 2. But they stipulate that their reviewers can be council employees. But our reviewers have got to be people from the community. We agreed to that. The results have come back, and the council reviewers scored 50% of their score was 0. The community scored 90%, was sort of 50% to 70%. Completely different. When we queried that, the council said the result stands. I then had to point out that the method was faulty. The council came back and said, only last week, they've assessed the reviewers and the reviewers were honest. Remember, 2 reviewers' scores was 50% 0, whereas the 2 reviewers said their average score was about 60. And they won't budge on that. I then said, if the reviewers were honest, the method is not only faulty, it is seriously faulty. Now, that's using my science in terms of trying to say the method isn't any good. So they are reconsidering. And today we had the reconsideration where the young man in the council as an officer said, we've looked at the method and we've made a small change. And you'll have to be assessed. So I wrote back today and said, a small change in the method, would you send me the analysis which shows that this small change has corrected the fault? I don't think he'll be able to do that. So what we have is a situation dealing with equality, people in Edinburgh belonging to this organisation doing work on race and all the protected characteristics. You know, there are 9, disability, religion, pregnancy, LGBT, etc. I am a scientist. My expertise is on cereals. But because I'm in that organisation, it is my scientific expertise that might help to save them, not my expertise of race relations. So what I'm trying to say is you have a degree from a university, as I've, in my experience, I used to say to my students that a degree, it doesn't matter what you've got it in. It could be French, physics, music, mathematics. I've got a PhD in brain science. What we try to teach people, what I tried to teach people when I taught for 30 years in the Heriot-Watt, is that we teach you to reason. And the reasoning process is the same in every degree. So it doesn't matter what you do, you should be able to do any job in terms of dealing with the management of people and situations within your job. Okay, if you're doing chemistry, then you're expected to know chemistry. But within the chemistry you do, you've got to be able to use social reasoning. Because if you don't, you're not going to get anywhere. Every job is about dealing with people. And you can't just apply a chemical equation to dealing with somebody who doesn't like you, who's troublesome, who, in fact, is ensuring that you're going to get fired. And therefore, it won't help you even at the interview system. And I'll give you an example of that. I was just asked by the Scottish government to talk to some employees, senior employees in the Scottish government, who are complaining that there is not significant representation of their ethnic group in senior positions in the Scottish government. So what do you say in circumstances like that? The head of the Scottish Civil Servants is sitting there, Sir Peter somebody, and you have the large ethnic group sitting in the audience, plus the majority ethnic group, which is white Scot, sitting in the audience. And what I did, I think stories are very good in terms of explaining situations. And I told them the story of, which is absolutely true, one of my students, because a lot of my students were brewers, so most of the beers you can buy in the supermarket and stuff are made by people I've taught. So if you drink Edinburgh Ale or Ossian or Brewdog or whatever, they're all my students. You see the damage I can cause. If you did my course, you can cause a lot of damage. However, one of the students had applied for a job with Whitbreads, and we were sitting in the room. Interviewer from Whitbread Company, chief executive, was interviewing a student for a job. And he said to the student, because I was sitting in the room, and he said to the student, "What kind of beers do you drink?" And the student said, "Well, I'm really an ale drinker. I don't like lagers." Now, Whitbreads, 90% of their production is lager. It's Heineken and Stella Artois. That's what Whitbread made in Luton in England. So you have a student in Scotland, wants to work for this company, and the guy says, "What kind of beers do you like?" And he says, "Ales." And the guy says, "Well, don't you like lagers?" And he says, "No, I don't really like them, they're too fizzy." So the chief executive looked at him and looked at me, and the interview was technically over. So he didn't get the job, of course. Now, I'm going to ask you the question. Of course, he was honest, wasn't he? Would you say that? Yeah, he was telling the truth, because he didn't like lagers and whatever. But you see, my position on that is, if he were honest, he shouldn't have applied for the job. Because he knows what he likes or what he didn't like. So why apply for a job from a company which would expect you to have an empathy for lagers? And I find that with a lot of my students, I tell them that. I says, you don't own the company, you don't pay for it, companies make a profit, and that's where your pension comes from. So a lot of people have certain morality, but then again, morality stretches to your pensions, the university where it gets its money, the roads where that money comes from. The distilling industry makes £5 billion profit a year. The only other industry that makes more profit than the Scotch whisky industry is oil. So consequently, if one says, I don't like Scotch, and you've been teaching students to make beer and Scotch whisky, so quite immoral. And I would say to them, yeah, that probably is the case, but it provides 45,000 jobs in the north of Scotland, plus the profit it makes worldwide, et cetera, et cetera. So, and they're very sustainable. In fact, nothing comes out of a distillery that causes pollution, because they've got the money to ensure that. So again, you have an industry, you have a business, and you have people wanting to work in it. The point I'm making there, you have to make up your own moral judgment before you do something. There's no point going into something and then start moaning and groaning about it, because you're not going to do the best job for yourself, and neither are you going to do the best job for the company. I think that one may say, well, with my background, how have I come to this position? And I've been very lucky. I always say, you can't, if you come from difficult circumstances, you can't, in fact, just be bright enough to get out of it. You have to be lucky, and I was fairly lucky, because although I'm standing here and so I was introduced as Sir whatever, and I've been a professor for so many years. But I arrived in the United Kingdom in 1955, actually on a banana boat at Liverpool, when I was 14 years and 11 months. Now, it is that 1 month why I'm standing in front of you. Because when I arrived, my mother left Jamaica in 1948. So I didn't see my mother between 1948 and 55. So when she came and met me at Paddington in 1955, I didn't know who she was. You know, we banter about it until she died in 2003. I said, my mother is richer than you. You just came and took me because I had no clue who she was. The point is that there is a certain good fortune that can happen. And I arrived on the 10th of March, 1955. And on the 11th of March, my mother woke me up at 7 o'clock in the morning after I just traveled 5,000 miles from Jamaica. And she was taking me to work as a grocery boy in North London. And when I came down to the steer at 7 in the morning, there was a guy standing there. And the guy said to my mother, is that Godfrey Palmer? And my mother said, yes. And he said, well, where are you going? And my mother said, we're going to work. And the guy said to my mother, you can go to work, but he can't. He's not 15. I was 14 years and 11 months. And in those days, you left school at 15. So I had to go to school for that month. And it is that month that has made the difference. Because I went to Shelburne Road Secondary Mod in London, and the head teacher said, well, I can't take you for a month because you'll ruin my register. It wasn't any academic decision. So I had to stay from March till June. And of course, being June, I played cricket. So I was terribly good at cricket. So the local grammar school heard about this because a secondary modern schoolboy was playing for London schoolboys cricket team against Eton and Harrow. So the local headmaster of the grammar school wanted a pretty good cricketer, so he had me transferred. So I got to Highbury Grammar School just on a transfer within 6 months of arriving in the country. And at Highbury Grammar School I played mostly cricket. The point is that the story, that's how it began. It's not about academic, it's sort of a bit luck. Of course I had to work after that. But one of the great turning points in my life was when I came to Edinburgh. So I started at the back, and I'm now going to the middle. I then got a degree in botany at Leicester University. And I didn't know what to do with it. What does an immigrant boy in 1964 do with a botany degree? I went back to London, and I said to the guy in the Labour Exchange, he asked me what I could do. I said, I've got an honours degree in botany. And this is in the middle of London. He turned to his colleague and he says, we've got a guy here who's got a degree. And the other guy said, I think he's got a temperature. I was given 2 jobs, one peeling potatoes and one working in a betting shop. So I chose the job peeling potatoes because I thought it was closer to botany. So I peeled potatoes for about 6 months, and I saw an advert for Edinburgh to do a PhD on cereals. Before that, though, I went for an interview with Sir Keith Joseph at the Ministry of Agriculture. And Sir Keith Joseph was a distinguished politician then. And he interviewed me, and he said, well, why do you want to work here? Why don't you go back to Trinidad and grow bananas? And I did point out to him that coming from Jamaica, and furthermore, it's difficult to grow bananas in Haringey, where I lived. However, coming to Edinburgh, I was interviewed just down the road there, Chambers Street, by a wonderful lady called Professor MacLeod. And I arrived, and it was 8 o'clock in the morning in 1964, December. She interviewed me for the PhD position. And at the end of the interview, which lasted only half an hour, I travelled up from London. This wonderful woman called Professor Anna MacLeod, she looked me straight in the face and she said, do you know, son, I think I'm going to take you. And I said, why? Because I'd done a bad interview. I knew I had. And very Scottish-wise, she looked at me straight in the face and said, I'm going to take you for 2 reasons. And I said, well, what are they? And she said, when I was telling you about the brewing and distilling industry and grain science and Edinburgh University and Heriot-Watt University, you were looking out the window. She said, that's a great point in your favor, she said, because I hate keen people. And I said, what's the second point? No, she couldn't have said that today because, with our political correctness, she said, and as far as I can discern, young man, you don't look English. That was 1964. Now, you may sound shocking, but that was how it was. So what I'm trying to do within the short period is what you think life is about in terms of just getting a degree, and the quality of that degree is important, so it is. But I can assure you, once you've got that degree, and the interview system is the great leveler, where in fact you have people looking at you, trying to perceive who you are, what you are, whether you'll fit in, because they will not employ you if in fact they have any perception that you will not fit in. And as far as I'm concerned, your degrees are important. You go into a job, you will end up, if you get a fulfilling job, where you will use your education, your ability, in order to defend not only yourself, but other people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I thought that was great, actually. There were 1 or 2 things there I thought, I wish I'd known that, actually, when I was doing some interviews. I was always very keen. It's probably why I never got so many jobs to start with. What we'll do next now is we'll invite the panel to come up, and I'll tell you who they are. And then in the light of what we just heard and some questions we've got, we'll just have a discussion for a while, and then we'll turn over to questions. So can I just invite the panel to come up? First of all, probably needs no introduction, but Ben Twist, who's the Director of Creative Carbon Scotland. Do you want to come and join us, Ben? So Ben's a really interesting fellow, I find, because he comes from the creative industries, and I think it says here that he was a theatre director at one point. Is that right?
Theatre director more than writer, but yeah, I've done both.
Yep. But we've been doing lots of work with Ben over the last wee while, just trying to understand the impact, for example, of Edinburgh Festival in terms of carbon. So I find he's one of these people that is able to combine that kind of understanding of the creative side with kind of some of the more management challenges as well. So I look forward to what Ben has to say. Next up is Briana Pegado, who's the president of USA. Briana? So Briana's currently president of the Edinburgh University Students' Association. I was amazed to find that the elections are almost upon us again.
In about 3 weeks, actually.
Amazingly. I also didn't know that she's the founder of the Edinburgh Student Arts Festival, bringing together all the 5 higher and further education institutes around Edinburgh to showcase the work of 250 artists.
Yeah.
Fascinating. She's done quite a lot of initiatives, actually. I won't try and list them, but I've been impressed in the short time, actually. It's amazing how quickly these sabbaticals passed. I found, for example, on cycling and transport initiatives, and I appreciate her help in trying to make the university more sustainable. So welcome, Briana.
Hi, everyone.
Next up, we've got Eilidh Brunton, who's Group Recycling Consulting at Vegware. Do people know who Vegware are? There's 1 or 2 nods, but they're a global company now, I think that's right in saying. Yep. And Eilidh provides recycling and environmental support to that global company with partners in the US, Dubai, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as providing a zero waste consultancy for customers looking to maximize all aspects of recycling. So welcome as well. And finally, Justina Adomavvičiūtė. No, that's not right.
Almost.
I practiced and I got it wrong. Adomavvičiūtė. Is that closer?
Yes.
So just as I arrived at the university in the summer of 2013, Justina left, which is hopefully just a coincidence. So Justina was with our department and helping us, and then has moved on to be a policy advisor at DEFRA. So welcome, Justina.
Thank you.
Sit down and toss a few questions. I said these would be easy questions, but now that I'm sitting down, maybe I'll change my mind. What I thought I'd do is just ask each one of the panel, and we'll just maybe get, just to start us off, just ask each one of you in turn, what made you, just in the light of what we've heard as well, what made you actually choose a career in environment or social responsibility or sustainability, or maybe you think you haven't made that choice. So let's just go down the list and start with Ben.
A bit of background, I'd spent about 25 years being a theatre director and working on strategy and other things in the arts, running organisations. And I was actually, the reason I'm in sustainability, I was desperate to try to get out of the arts because I would advise everybody that it's a terrible decision. It's an addiction. It's an addiction, and it should be resisted at all costs. But I became sort of aware that the third sector organisations that I work with, quite big influencing organisations like the arts funding bodies and so on, were useful for changing the world. And I'd done quite a lot on quite big scale in the arts. I distributed a lot of lottery funds to build buildings and so on. And I thought there's something here that you can do something with. And I decided that doing an MSc in carbon management, which is what I did a few years ago, would allow me to add the new knowledge to the old knowledge that I had of making organizations do things and using them to influence society. I could influence it in an interesting way. And I'd had a long interest in things green. At the age of 14, I went to the National Centre for Alternative Technology in Heriot-Watt in Wales, and that sort of set me on a path. So I brought the two things together, and I want to change the world, and that's one way to do it, I think.
Briana, you've got an MA in Sustainable Development, is that right?
Yes, I did. So I got an MA in Sustainable Development. I see some familiar faces in the audience from the Sustainable Development MA, so hello to you. Here at the University of Edinburgh, so I was in the first cohort of graduates in July, so I only graduated really recently. I'm going to do a really quick straw poll, though. So how many people here know what they want to do for their career? If you do, just put your hand up. Okay, so we have a couple of people in the audience. So those of you that know what you want to do, you can ignore everything I'm going to say for the next hour. Because to answer Dave's question, why did I end up in a career related to sustainability? I mean, when you're elected president of Edinburgh University Students Association, there is a bit of luck, just to echo our keynote speaker. And I'm elected full-time for a year, paid by the Students Association, which is a completely separate organization and entity from the University of Edinburgh, to work full-time to represent your views and interests to the university. But I stood for the position and was elected and started to kind of fulfill the sustainability agenda I had. And really, it was about addressing two key issues I identified. And the reason why I bring this up is because I think for those of us that are not quite sure what we want to do, but do have some kind of idea that we want to contribute to the world, make change, make the world a better place, my advice to you is just to focus on what those things are that you want to accomplish and change. And the rest of it comes together, believe it or not. So quickly, to answer the question, the two big projects that I kind of focus on this year that I think are the most kind of, I'd say, easily identifiably kind of sustainable. One is a cycle scheme project we're launching next week, which is for first-year students living at Pollock Halls. And what we did is we looked at how many students at the University of Edinburgh cycle and what some of the barriers are to cycling at the university. And it was identified through a survey that first years are the least likely to cycle because they don't know where to buy a bicycle, or they don't know how to get one, or it's the first time living in this new city and maybe not being so comfortable on the roads or with road traffic. So we're launching a pilot on Monday, actually, with 21st years. To try and identify that problem. That's just a short example. But I'd say, a career in sustainability, I see sustainability and sustainable development as something holistic. So whether or not it's directly contributing to, minimizing a carbon footprint or starting an arts festival because you think there needs to be a community for people to come together, or it's because you simply want to make the world a better place. All of those things are all related to sustainability, and I think you should pursue what you really care about and love.
Great, thank you. Let's keep going down the panel.
Yeah. When I was about 7, I read a book called Bodkin, Keeper of the Marsh. Don't know if anyone's read it. It's, have you? Good. Someone's heard of it. It's written by Friends of the Earth, and it's a children's book, and it really sparked my interest in environmental issues at a really young age. From there, I pestered my parents to start recycling at home well before anyone else was doing that, and carting stuff down to the supermarket. And from then on, I went and I did a degree in geography at Glasgow Uni, which I loved, but geography is the most broad subject ever. Everything is geography is what I learned. So one day you're learning about glaciers, next you're doing recycling, and then you're doing populations, and it was so broad, and I loved it all, but I was really enjoyed the environmental side. So that's when I decided to come to Edinburgh University and to really focus my degree and do environmental sustainability, which really focused it on the environmental side. And I just knew from then that that's absolutely what I wanted to do and where I wanted to work. And from then I feel like I had quite a lot of luck and landed myself where I am today.
Thanks. And finally, last but not least, Justina. I should have said Justina is working on something that used to be close to my heart. I used to be a regulator at the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, and Justina's working on fluorinated gas regulation, which doesn't sound terribly exciting, but actually it's quite important. So
Very exciting.
and exciting, yeah. Justina.
Okay, so I graduated from Edinburgh in 2013. I think I chose this path before I came to university. When I was about 16, I first read about the ozone holes and the ozone layer and what's happening with pollution and things like that, and just became kind of concerned and passionate about it and started sort of organizing things at school. And I didn't know how to get into this field, and it seemed really obvious to study ecology or environmental science. When I got here, I realized that that wasn't it. And as was said before, sustainability is so holistic and so broad, and it's about any area. In any area, you can make things sustainable. So I discovered quite quickly that I didn't want to be a researcher, and I didn't want to be a scientist. And for me, university was about exploring what else is out there. Who can you be? What can you be? Just all different possibilities and options. And I worked in the Department for Social Responsibility and Sustainability for a little bit, from when it was established. And towards the end of my degree, I had some courses on policy making, and that got me really interested in policy and regulation, because it seemed like it's an instrument to make high-level, broad, large-scale change. And as much as I was passionate and interested about grassroots projects and community projects and local things, at the same time I was fascinated by these big international agreements, big international events where countries come together and they try to agree something. I think it's fascinating how so many different cultures can look for something to work together on. So so I sort of almost accidentally applied for DEFRA. Again, to echo that there is some luck there. Basically, I was doing my dissertation on looking how to develop indicators to monitor success of the Common Agriculture Policy, only because that was the only subject that I could learn about policy on because of the lecturer that I had. And I was looking for data on DEFRA's website, and there was a vacancy. In 2 days' time, there was a deadline. So I debated for a day whether I should do it. For another day, I quickly put together an application. And so it happened. And so I started working there on the agriculture side. And then there was an opportunity to go and work on fluorinated gases, which is a greenhouse gas, but it also relates to Montreal Protocol and ozone layer, which is why I find it fascinating, because it's in between two international agreements. And maybe more about that later, but that's the long story short, kind of how that choice was made.
Great, thank you very much. So already, depending on your point of view, I think there's either a suggestion that at least some of the people on the panel did their degree and immediately something came of that was related. But we heard earlier that actually maybe, the degree is just one thing and then you find your way, or Briana's point of view is saying, well, actually, know what you want to do first. I mean, I had no Scoobies what I want to do at 21 or possibly even now. So I want to ask people on the back of these kind of early thoughts, so pick the question you want to answer, really. Either how closely is your experience to date related to your student experience? Or what tips would you have for people in the audience who are saying, well, actually, this does sound fascinating stuff and I want to get involved? So I'll let you answer one of those questions, or anything else, actually, because I'm pretty generous sort of host. So any other question that you feel you want to answer. So Ben, either how close is it related or tips and challenges?
I think my first degree was in philosophy, and interestingly, it comes back to luck. I was going to go and be a nurse. I had a job, I had a training place to be a nurse at St Thomas's Hospital in London. It was only because I happened to do a good show during the last Fringe during my university career that I thought, oh, there might be a career in this theatre lark. So it's, it is all about luck. I think it has turned out to be quite a lot. I remember writing a 500-word application to get into the MSc in carbon management, and I said what I said earlier, that I want to use the knowledge I have now, and I want to add to it this knowledge you're going to give me, the learning you're going to give me to do this, and to use the influencing organisations that I know to change the world. And I think that is largely what has happened. But I've had to, for a start, I've created the organisation that I now work for. So that came about partly by luck, partly using contacts. And I've had to steer that organisation, and I'm lucky that I can, in the way that I want to do it. So I have managed to do the thing that I wanted to do in very broad terms, and it's perhaps a bit narrower than I would have liked. The field I work in is one field. I'm managing to open that out a bit, but I'm having to work constantly in order to achieve that aim that I originally had. That sounds as though the aim was really clear and straightforward. I don't think it was. It was an inkling of an idea that I wrote into 500 words on a day on holiday, a bit like. So I think it has happened, but it takes constant work, and I think constant readjustment, because the world of sustainability, the world that we're in, I think is one it's constantly developing, it's constantly moving. We're learning so much so fast. And I think it is one, perhaps not so much of generalism, well, I think generalism is quite important, but it's a complex system, I would say, and you need to adjust and see where things are and what you can achieve and what you can head towards. I think I'll stop there.
Great, okay. Well, I mean, I'm just looking at you in the audience, and I was literally sitting in your position about 6 months ago, and I would come to sustainability events like this and careers events and think, I'm here, I want some answers. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing in the next couple of months. I want to come out of this event with some answers. So I'll tell you a couple of things, and I have a few tips. But the first off is that, this is an extremely exciting time. You're at university, you're coming across people you may never come across again. Hopefully you will in your careers, but this is a concentrated time and area in your lives where you'll be interacting with so many different people and able to explore absolutely anything. And we are coming out of a recession. This is a really tough time for all of us looking for jobs. But I think the positive side of that is that the world is constantly changing and evolving. And we're at a really critical time in humanity and our society, where there's innovation, there's technology that's constantly changing. Most of us will have jobs in the next 10 to 20, 30 years that don't exist right now, that we can't define, that we have no idea what they will even look like, but we do have an inkling of what they may be and what they will contribute to a much wider picture of making the world a better place. So what I would say is, when I ask that question of how many of you know what you want to do, you don't need to. I'm sure I don't. Dave was just saying he doesn't know if he does. It's constantly changing and evolving. But it is really important to think about what you're interested in, what your strengths are, and start to map those out. Because sustainability is a very kind of wide, all-encompassing topic. My degree, Sustainable Development, was quite similar to, I think, your geography degree. We were looking at something different every week. And though I got so much knowledge and wealth of kind of experience from starting to study those subject areas, I came out of my degree thinking, there are a lot of problems on this planet. What do I do? Where do I start? Which one do we start with? How is this going to happen? Will anything change? And it was a really important eye-opener to start to identify what these key issue areas are. But from that, take out of that what you think you can start to do to address them. And it's not just about you individually. We're all collectively here on this planet contributing to global warming. We're all collectively contributing to overpopulation. We're all collectively finding solutions to water shortages or environmental degradation. So it's just about picking up on things that are your key strengths and thinking about what area is really interesting to you at this point in time. And I think, a lot of people look at our generation and think, sometimes we're entitled, sometimes we're arrogant, sometimes we think we're going to solve all of these world issues. But we can do it all. You can't do it all at the same time. You can experiment with different things at different points in your life. You can start exploring areas that interest you now and kind of move on from there. But be broad and embrace things being chaotic, embrace the uncertainty, and allow yourselves to start to explore how you can make a positive impact by starting to identify where you think you're interested in those key areas lie.
My advice would be something probably a little more practical. It's just get some experience. Get yourselves out there. You've got long summer holidays, and I wish I'd taken this advice myself. Go out and get some work experience for a few weeks. Companies will take you on. They'll give you an internship, whether it's for a couple of weeks, a couple of months. Try out different things. Get a feel for what you might like to do. And also what that adds to your CV is amazing. When I came out, I hadn't taken my own advice, and I came out of university. I couldn't get interviews because I didn't have any experience of my CV. In the end, I did get an internship with Vegware, and I worked free for 4 months, and it just happened to be at a time when the company was growing and they couldn't let me go and gave me a permanent job, but that doesn't seem to be happening quite so much anymore. So experience is kind of really important. So for example, I was lucky in my situation, but now I've just taken on a new member of staff. We had 80 application forms. At minimal, they needed to have an environmental degree, but so many people applied that anyone who just had a degree and no experience just went to the bottom of the pile, if I'm going to be honest. So, you need someone that makes you stand out, whether it's, having a few weeks work experience somewhere, or if it's doing your dissertation with a company. We take on dissertation students because we're quite heavily involved in research. So if anyone is interested in doing their dissertation, I'd like to have you. So yeah, just doing something that would make your CV stand out just above and beyond your degree is
There was
really,
an offer
really
in there, by the way. Did you write that down?
Can I make a quick offer? I've got a paid internship for this summer, which is currently on the University Careers website. And you don't need any particular degree. I think that the closing date may be Monday.
So I'm counting 3 now. That's Ben's, that's the Carbon Trust I mentioned, and Eilidh as well. So if there's any more out there, just shout out.
No particular offers, but I can talk you through later how to get into civil service. It's not very difficult, I have to say. Okay, so I forgot the question already, but
pretty much answer whatever you like, but particularly.
So there was one part
tips and challenges.
about my degree and relevance to my job, and then another tips and challenges. So for my degree, as I said, it was a bit all over the place. It was about exploring things. So the core of my degree was ecological science, which was plants, animals, statistics, research methods. Then I had a lot of choice subjects to choose to add on to that. So I did marketing, I did management, I did philosophy, like environmental philosophy. I did project management, all sorts of really random things. If you put them together, there is no one job that would make use of all of them. So on one hand, you can say my job looks nothing like it. On the other hand, I know that I'm drawing on those experiences all the time. Like my project management skills have been really useful in any job that I did. Really, really useful. Obviously, understanding about policy, that was probably one reason why they took me to the job, because no one really knows what common agriculture policy is. They were so surprised that on day one I already started drawing diagrams and things like that, when it took people 2 months to understand how that system worked. When I worked in this department, social responsibility and sustainability, I worked in communications and I used my marketing experience. So one of the tips, I think, is just explore what really interests you. Doesn't matter that it seems like it doesn't make sense and that additional course that you choose seems like it doesn't fit, but actually what you're doing is you're building your unique skill set and your own unique personality, which will be your unique selling point, because no one else will have that combination of really weird things coming together. And you never know where it will come useful, and that combination will come in handy somewhere, definitely. So that's one of the things that I think haven't been mentioned. But other than that, definitely agree that experience is really important. And I don't think I would have gotten my current job just because I did an environmental degree and had policy experience, even though that was very beneficial. But it was also very beneficial that I had 3 years of work experience. And throughout my degree, I worked part-time with the department and what was before Sustainability Office and what was before Transition Edinburgh University. And 90% of my examples and applications and interviews were from my work experience, not from my university experience. So although, of course, it was useful, it wasn't the reason why I got the job. So definitely experience, absolutely. And if you can make your dissertation as relevant to what you want to do, that will open up a lot of doors, and it will be, something to do networking and to get yourself out there and known. And probably another thing to say is, for tips, just find what you're passionate about and be passionate about it. Because how I got first into my first job experience was I was just really passionate about land traveling. I was first-year student, and I'm from Lithuania, and I decided for Christmas I'm going to go home by land because it's more sustainable than planes. And I had the biggest adventure of my life. It was so fun. I got snowed in Netherlands. I got didn't know where to sleep in Germany because trains were delayed. Like, all sorts of really exciting things happened. I could talk about that for another hour. But basically, I came back.
Maybe to the wine later.
Yeah. I came back feeling very passionate about talking to international students about take trains and not planes. It's so much more fun and so much more sustainable. And that's how I got to know people who were also passionate about that. And it happened to be people who were working on these projects, and I could volunteer with them. And then when a job opportunity came along, I got employed, and that's how I got in. So if you find what you're passionate about and you really like it, then doors will open up. You will meet people that do these things. And if they see that you're passionate and you're excited and you're keen, maybe not all of people, but some people, if they see that you're keen, then they will take you on. And yeah, the doors will open up. So I think my tip number 1 is be passionate.
And you wanted to come in on that?
Yeah, a couple of things to reckon there. One is that I think choosing the right destination is really, really valuable because it can take you to the right area. And I chose the wrong destination. I decided to do my dissertation about the international climate negotiations, which was disastrous because it was quite clear that I was not going to be working for the UN, age 46 with no PhD. But the other thing I would say is that it seems to me that there's a danger of sustainability being ghettoized as a sort of subject in its own right. And I would really echo the idea that actually you should do what you're interested in and then apply sustainability to that. Look at that subject, that passionate, that area that you find fascinating, and look at it through a sustainability lens. Because then I think you've got both, you've got your knowledge and your excitement, and you've got your sustainability knowledge. So I would think of it in that way rather than, I've got to do sustainability. What we want. I mean, years ago, I used to run a theatre in Manchester, and one of the things that there was a community and education department when I arrived there. And I thought, this is crazy. The whole of our work should be community and education. So it took me some time, it took me about 3 years, but by the end of that, I had rewritten everybody's job description in the organisation. So community and education within each of their jobs. Now I'm sure that what Dave is trying to do here at the university is put sustainability in everybody's job description throughout the university and every student's job description. And I think that's what we should be doing. I don't think we should be separating out sustainability. We should be making it part of everyday life, every job, every career. So go into whatever brewing, distilling, whatever it is that you fancy, and make sustainability part of it.
Can I just say a few words myself? First of all, that don't go away early because there is wine outside later. And if you don't drink wine, there should be water and there should be orange juice as well, I hope. And realise, of course, with the guests we have, we probably should have had some beer or some whiskey. So we'll try and do better next time. Second thing is get your questions ready because I'm about to come to you shortly and it'd be very embarrassing if we just sat here for half an hour with no questions. So begin to think about your questions, please. Just want to give you my own reflections as well, which is very much to agree with what people are saying. It seems so tough at the moment if you're young and trying to get a job, and it's it wasn't like that when I was growing up. And my experience of going to interviews was to be a rather arrogant young man. And when they said, well, what can you bring to the table? Well, I was top of my year. Okay, and what else can you bring? Well, in the second year I was top of my year. There wasn't really, I just assumed that there were rules, and if I followed them and I got a degree and it was good enough, that would be good enough. And I think probably now looking back, that's not right actually. And just as people were saying, that kind of wider life experience and that being willing to break the rules for what you're passionate about. It took me a long time to learn those lessons. So I think that is really good advice. I'll maybe stop there actually. You can ask me more later. I just want to say one last question to the panel before we go to, before my voice gives way, and also before we go to questions, which is, obviously we're in Edinburgh University and we're part of an event that we've done with the Careers Service and with Development and Alumni, and each one of you actually is an alumnus. So let me just name check this. We've got Geoff's PhD from 1967 in grain science, and Ben's got an MSc in carbon management from 2010, it says here, is that right?
Yep.
Briana, as you heard, is an MA in sustainable development very recently. Eilidh's MSc is in environmental sustainability from 2011, still correct? Yep. And Justina in ecological sciences with management from 2013.
Yes.
Now, the reason for mentioning that is just to make the point about what a great institution we are. But also, I think another lesson for me is I didn't, and I want to genuinely ask people this question about the value of being part of an institution. And Briana touched upon it really, that the universities are a fabulous place to be. And I think looking back, I wish I'd kept more contact with my own university. So I want to ask that question of the value you see of possibly going forward, maintaining links with your university, and you know how you see that. And Geoff, feel free to jump in as well.
Okay.
I tried to avoid my university for years. My first degree was
That's the wrong answer.
My first degree was also in Edinburgh. And they keep sending you this magazine trying to get money out of you. And I managed to lose them for many years. But then I came back and did a MSc in carbon management, and they got me again. You people are down there in the front row. But it's a. I think you were saying that I met so many people and I've made so many connections that informally that's where I use it, and it has been very, very valuable to me. So for me, that's the important bit, the sheer opportunity to meet such a range of people. I did philosophy, which is a very general thing. I met an enormous range of people. I did philosophy on Tuesdays, and I did theatre the rest of the week. And in theatre, there were medics and scientists and what have you. I shared flat with scientists and mathematicians and English graduates, so undergraduates. So I met such a range of people, and that has lasted me all my life. So I think that's the thing. You don't often get this opportunity. Get out there and use it. I don't know whether that's the answer you wanted. But
Well, I think if you hadn't noticed, I'm American. And in higher education in the United States, part of the entire reason you go to university, if you're privileged enough to go, is because of your alumni network. So, you know, if we think about this, there are still millions of people in the world that don't go to university. We are part of an elite. We are privileged going to university. That's a fact. And I think that not taking advantage of the fact that you're at university, that you have these networks, that you're walking into a library, that you can email someone, regardless of whether or not you think it's, you know, comfortable or not, just do it. Email someone. If you see that they were a University of Edinburgh graduate, say, I went to the University of Edinburgh, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. Will you get a cup of coffee with me? Can I chat to you for 5 minutes? Use this. It would be silly not to. And the reason why I bring up, you know, being American is that a lot of networks in the United States, you know, going to university, 50% of the reason why you go, but beyond getting a degree, is the alumni network that you have access to. And when I applied to university here, one of the first things my mom said to me, she goes, well, in the UK, they don't really do the alumni thing, do they? Because that's the reaction. You know, my alumni network just wants me to pay money and they're going to bug me the whole time. But it's not about that. It's about the connections, the networks. It's about mentorship. It's about mentoring people that come after you. It's about being mentored by people that graduated. It's so important, and it sounds really cringy and really silly, but it's true. I mean, this is something you really need to take advantage of. Don't let it go. And if you decide you leave university and don't want to think about it for 5 years, that's fine. But 5 years after that, get back in touch and make sure you use your networks.
Yeah, I would agree. You're kind of at a time where, you know, make the use of kind of what's out there and what's available for you. I certainly wish I'd done that a little bit more. I think, you know, you've got a career service and they're there to advise. Don't go out on your own and try and work it out when there's people there who can kind of on your doorstep to help. And as I said, you know, I loved my time at Edinburgh University, and it's really shaped my career and it's got me to where I am. So, you know, I've given something back, you know, not just being here tonight, but, you know, I've gone back to the course leaders with the course that I worked on, and we've taken students off of that course to do dissertations with us. So, you know, there are a lot of people out there who want to help you and help you shape where you're going so that you can go down a good path as well.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add. I think it was one of the first tips that I got when I started studying. I went to this opening ceremony, and there was the president saying, okay, now we're going to spend 5 minutes. You're going to meet people around you, shake their hands, and tell an interesting fact about yourself. Go on now. And the point was that he said, there's never a place in your life where you're surrounded by people that do all sorts of different things. Because more and more with time, you'll specialize, and you'll be surrounded by people that do the same thing as you do in your job. And you kind of lose touch with all the different sectors. So for me, the most valuable is that I can get in touch with people who are in finance, people who are in science, people who are in all sorts of things, NGOs, whatever. And not just for career purposes in terms of my own career, but it's important for me to understand how different sectors work and different organizations and different people. Because we do want to work together. I mean, that's the vision, just be all kind of focused on one aim rather than separated and not understanding each other. So it's just a great opportunity to expand your networks to other sectors, not just what you're specializing in. All sorts of benefits come from that.
Yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, as far as can I stand up? Face the audience. The university's been, I came here in 1967, I think it was 64, and I graduated in 67. And the PhD was, I thought it was dead easy because you didn't have an exam. So do a PhD. But the other side is the university knows where I live. And I was speaking to one of your colleagues from the alumni just now, and I was saying they know where I live, so they can always sort of get in touch with me and ask me to do things. And it's not because I'm any good, it's because I'm cheap. So the university is very aware of the benefits of their graduates. If you've got an expertise they need, then I feel I'm privileged and honoured to really be asked to come here today. And the other thing is that the university also has a very, what I call a compassionate community side, which, just a quick example, I have a friend whose mother died, and to our surprise, her mother left her body to this university, which completely shocked us. She was Scottish. And when she came to me and she said, well, my mom left my body to university for, students. So I thought, well, what could I do for her? And I rang up the university without telling her. And I've managed to get a plaque to her mother in the George Street Gardens. So there's an oak tree there to Catherine Ferguson. And it is there in the garden. And in fact, it's to my friend's mother. So the university can do that kind of thing. And I feel that what they've taught me, and I said in terms of just education, why I've been successful is the university taught me to think innovatively, meaning that I can recall all the various things I've taught from different areas, and I can use those at once. And if you can do that, you'll not just be an ordinary worker, you'll be an exceptional one with that which the university have taught you. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm going to stand up for the next bit just so I can see you in case I miss any questions. Do you want to join us as well? Yeah. So now's your chance. I hope you've been brewing questions. I would say when we get to the questions, please say who you are if you want. Well, it'd be nice if you did. Who's the question for? Great if it's for the whole panel. Even faster if it's for somebody in particular. Please don't feel that I used to sit in events thinking, well, I'm not even sure this is the right question. Just ask it anyway, We're in danger of all agreeing as well, so can we maybe have a question that's a bit controversial as well? Come on, somebody at the back who's actually thinking, what a load of crap all this is, I want to say this.
Go on, have a drink.
Let's just start. We'll take the questions one at a time. If we've got a whole forest, I'll maybe start taking 2 or 3 together. So first question, who wants to kick off? Or we could sit in silence. Oh, there we go. Gentleman at the front here. Just wait on a second, sorry, the microphones will come.
Yeah, I'm quite loud. I don't know if I need a mic. This is a question for Justina in particular. I find as I continue to study politics and policy, I get more and more jaded with the larger institutions and their ability to have an impact because, logic dictates you need to start from the largest target possible and promote change from that level in order to execute the most valuable and pervasive change. But by the same token, they seem sort of, I guess, obviously not now your particular institution has a face, but most of them seem faceless, and they seem like an amorphous thing. How do you, I guess, combat that that level of becoming jaded, particularly with regards to this field, because it seems like there's a lot of headwind for people interested?
Okay. So it can be depressing, and sometimes if I start thinking about it, I do get kind of frustrated because change happens very slowly. You see a lot of resistance. You see a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of other things taking priority. So even in the Department for Environment, our current priority under the current government is economic growth. And you might figure out that might not always work together. So you don't always have a lot of power to do things because it comes from, like when you're in the organization, it comes from above a lot of the time, and therefore you can get quite disempowered. But if you put those things aside and you just accept that that's the system that we have and we need to make change within the framework that we have and start pushing where we can, then if you can do that, then it's possible to be enthusiastic and motivated and learn about the system, how the rules work, so that you can go around them or you can use them for your own advantage. But it does take something. So if you're very much political, I would say don't go into public sector because sometimes you have to close your eyes for some things and just focus on the positive and focus what you can do and the difference that you can make. Because if you focus on stuff that doesn't work, then it's depressing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And I'm going to open up to the rest of the panel, actually, because I could see it's a really good question, actually. So I know Briana and probably Ben, and anybody else from the panel who wants to join in on that too. So Briana.
I think that's a really good question because I actually came here to study international relations, and I'm from Washington, D.C., and I grew up in a city around a lot of politicians, and you have the UN, you have the World Bank, and part of me, because I've been very privileged growing up around that, has been very jaded thinking, no one's going to solve global warming or climate change because here we are at these international meetings and what comes of them? This is just ridiculous. And I think you can sit from the outside or even trying to influence public policy or international policy and think this is such slow incremental change. Is it worth it? Should I be investing my time in it? On the opposite end of things, being part of the student movement and being a student union president and meeting people from other student unions across the UK and the National Union of Students, there's a part of me that is still cynical going, okay, it's 2015, there is no student movement anymore. Are we kidding ourselves? Why do we talk about this collective action as something that actually works? But I think I've been really, my eyes have been opened, and I think that there's some direct action you can make that actually creates change. If you look at, I'm going to bring up something a little controversial, but if you look at the university's ethical investment policy, Tasha Boardman, who's our Vice President of Services, and I have been working very closely with Dave Gorman, with the University Secretary, to develop the university's divestment policy. And it's taken some time for there to be any movement on it. And if it wasn't for the actions of people in Planet and their direct action, if it wasn't for us sitting on University Court at the boardroom demanding that something happen, if it wasn't for Dave Gorman and his great work and people coming at it from all the different angles, there'd be no movement. So I'd say don't be jaded, because some systems and structures don't work. Some of it is slow, but we need some of these systems in place for there to be any sort of order and democracy and any sort of change. You need activists that are outside of that space, that are demanding change. You need people that see the whole picture and are willing to work with all the different actors to try and make these things work. But change happens, and things do happen, and sometimes it's on a small scale and it becomes larger. Sometimes it's a direct event that causes, these consequences that make these actions, that create consequences that make action. And sometimes systems are jaded and slow, and people are bored, But I think our world is dynamic, and actually all of this has to coexist together for there to be any real direct action, change, progress, incremental, or just immediate.
Yeah, and just to shortly add on to that, these systems are made up of people. It's all individuals together in some form of an organization or a framework or a convention or whatever. And a lot of people do get resigned with time. They're there for 10 years and they see no change happening. So it's only by bringing in new energy and young people with new ideas and enthusiasm that these systems can actually change. Because we need to start thinking outside of the box in these systems that are very old sometimes.
I think too, the way I had to give a talk something, and what I described it as is system consciousness. And if you have that, then you can use it to actually change the system or add to it. But if you decide there is no such thing as system consciousness, then in fact you'll fail.
I think we're absolutely talking about systems, and I think you're absolutely right that you need to think system-wide and be aware that systems work and how they work. The work that I'm doing at the moment, both in I'm doing a PhD part-time and the day-to-day work, is based on the idea that you need to work at structural level, organizational level, and individual level. And you need to keep pushing at those all the time, simultaneously. It's very difficult, I think, to know sometimes. You have to be a sort of a long-term and a short-term optimist. It's very difficult to know when the things you're seeking to achieve will happen. But you have to be confident that actually work that you do today will have some effect. The thing about systems is they're rather complex. It's very difficult to know whether the effect that you're wanting is the one that you're going to achieve. But actually, if you don't keep pushing, nothing will happen. And I think that's a fundamental thing that we've got to remember in this the situation that we're in all sorts of ways. And it needs radical action by individuals and grassroots groups to somehow be aligned, not necessarily consciously by them, with the structural and the infrastructural things that are going on. So people who are thinking at more than one level are really important on that.
Okay, I'll come with just one quick comment, which is I think you need a certain resilience when you're trying to make change, particularly in public policy. So the Homer Simpson idea, if first you don't succeed, give up, you're wrong to try. That's not going to work. And you have to be prepared to put in some time and some effort and see your efforts fail and then get up and try again.
Samuel Beckett said, try, fail, fail again, fail again, fail better, or something like that. You just got to keep pushing.
Anyway, there's a lady over here waiting patiently.
Hi, my question is for Ben. I wanted to first of all congratulate you on Carbon Creative Scotland. I think it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. My family come from a world of creative arts, and I think that it's certainly an area within the sustainable development question that is under kind of researched. And I suppose my question within that is, why did you choose Carbon within the festival kind of construct? And do you see that as being able to be applicable to, say, music industries and other art forms?
Carbon is it's not the only thing, but it's a really good sort of proxy, if you like, because it encompasses so much. Food, biodiversity, pollution, energy use, and so on. And one of the things we really know is that our whole society at the moment is based on the pumping of carbon out into the atmosphere. So it's essential in the short term to deal with, but also almost anybody can start thinking about how they contribute to that problem. So it's a useful proxy as much as anything else. Absolutely, it's relevant to all the arts. The arts themselves are probably relatively small carbon emitters compared to cement works and oil refineries and heavy industry. But the thing that I think is really important is that we have enormous influencing power. We deal in ideas and values and debates. We're constantly imagining different futures, whether it be a painting on a wall or a song that somebody writes and performs or whatever. And we talk to an awful lot of people. There's a report that's just come out, the Scottish Household Survey, I think it's called, saying that I think 72% of the Scottish population attend a cultural event in any 1 year, and that excludes cinema. If you include cinema in that, it goes up to 98% or something. So basically, we talk to the whole population, more or less, one way or the other. And we can talk to them about the way we operate ourselves, but also the work that we're producing, and we can frame work in particular ways, or we can actually make work about sustainability and what have you. I'm not saying that you have to go to see a climate change play every night of the week, but actually there are ways of touching upon the subjects that we're interested in through the work that we make, as well as by running our organisations effectively and saying that we run our organisations effectively. So it is relevant throughout the creative sector. And the creative sector is a weird one. There are lots of people in it who aren't particularly creative, but there are also lots of people who are very creative and are doing extraordinary things. And I'm interested in channeling those people's imaginations and their knowledge and their power to speak to a wider world. So yeah, it's absolutely there.
Great. Thank you, great question. Do we have any more questions? Have we got any disagreement? Gentleman at the back.
Thank you. I'm Maximo Sidio from the Sustainable Development Society. This is probably a targeted question to Briana. What would you recommend besides, of course, having good grades and building networks? Which are the key things that students should be doing to get better prepared for careers in sustainability?
This is almost an answer on the back end. I don't know how else to describe it. It's a strange answer. But I think one of our issues as a generation as a whole is we're really bad at articulating what our skills are. Because when we start to go to a job interview, or if we think about what our work experience has been, everyone who's living and breathing in this room has done things outside of university. I don't care if you work at Pizza Hut, or if you've helped your mom in the garden, or if you've been working your entire way through university. You've done something outside of university. So we need to start thinking about how we articulate that. If you're a manager at Pizza Hut and you're managing 8 people, that's a management skill. You have to manage people, you have to know what their schedules are, you have to make sure that the product gets out when it's supposed to. That's management, and that's a very valuable skill. You know, if you're out in the elements and you like to go, I don't know, tree walking, or you know how to identify certain types of trees or water masses or land masses, that's a skill. So besides getting a good degree, besides, you know, having some work experience, please develop a way to talk about it in a currency, in a language that is effective, that your employer will say, okay, so you had a part-time job, what does this have to do with sustainability and sustainable development? You can say, well, I know how to manage people, or I understand the impact of, you know, CO2 emissions on our business because people are driving cars to deliver the pizza. And I know I keep using Pizza Hut, I don't know why. But the point is that you really do need to find a way to articulate it well. And I think, you know, you have time now, whether or not you're writing your dissertation or writing an essay, or, you know, even if you're at work, or if you're helping family members, if you're a carer or whatever it is, you have time to think and start to think about how you're going to articulate what you've done for the last 18 to 23 years of your life. Please start thinking about what you've been doing and how you can tell your story. Because if you tell your story well and sell yourself well and articulate yourself well, you will be employed. We're all employable. You know, we go to the University of Edinburgh, so please develop that. That's my advice.
No, Ben wants to come out. Just look down the panel and see if anybody else wants to chip in before we give it back.
I just think finally, you know, that when I was a young man, marketing, if you mention marketing 40 years ago, Scottish brewers, which were the biggest brewers in the world, they'd employ one marketing guy. And everybody, when he got the job, everybody said in the company, what's he going to do? Because the concept of marketing wasn't there. Now, every company has marketing, university have them, everybody. And I think you've got an opportunity now. You've got this concept of sustainability, which is new in that sense. And therefore, just like marketing, it's an important part. That's how you sell it at your interview. It's an important part of every job, everything we do. And you say you need a sustainable person in this company. Because if you don't, then in fact, everything that adds up to the success of the company will not add up because you're missing sustainability. So you have to sell it as a concept, which is an important part of the way we live.
As a theatre director, you do an awful lot of interviewing. You audition people for jobs, and all the actors that you see are good actors. And you see an actor every 20 minutes, all day long. You might have some time off for lunch if you're lucky. And the ones you remember are the ones who've got something to say. Because they can all act, but actually, do they have any values? Do they have anything interesting to say about the subjects that you're looking at? And I would say that's something that's really valuable. Know what you want to say. Know what you want to change in the world. What you're trying to do, and particularly in an area like sustainability, where it is about changing the world, in whatever form. So I think actually having something to say is really valuable, and that will set you apart. When you interview a lot of people, they blur. But at the end of the day, you can remember one or two of the people that you met. And actually, the ones who've got something interesting to say are the ones you'll remember. So that's what I would say. Have something worth saying, and it's about values.
So be memorable like I did with my first ever interview and spill coffee all over the whole panel. So they did remember me. They didn't give me the job.
And that's one thing about being memorable as well. And I got that from every interview I did, feedback saying, came across very confident. So not just about having what to say, not just about selling your skills, but just what kind of person you are and how you come across personally and make a relationship with the interviewer. So if you have any opportunity to practice public speaking, for example, do that. All these soft skills that aren't obvious for a job, this isn't knowledge or a technique or something, but just like, you know, being confident with people, being good with talking, being comfortable with yourself, being, you know, get some feedback from your friends. Do you speak too fast? Do you speak clearly? I mean, all these kind of little things that will make you seem like, wow, that's the person we would like to have in our organization, because people like them. They're smiley and cheerful and happy and confident. So yeah, work a little bit on yourself as well if you have some, I don't know, flaws.
If you have any flaws out there. We've probably got time for one or two more questions, so can I just get a sense of how many more questions we've got? Who wants to keep asking questions? Have we actually... Because there's one there. Good. Is there any others? No? Great. We've got the gentleman in the front. Just hang on 1 second.
Is the marketing and business sustainability in the States, is it a larger topic over there than it is in Edinburgh?
In the States?
Yeah.
Okay, great question, thank you. Wow, okay, well first, I mean, you know, you think of Scotland, and I'm talking about Scotland, not the rest of the UK. Scotland has some of the most progressive renewable energy policy in the world, progressive environmental policy in the world, and so in many ways, this is it. You know, you're in Scotland, and this is where you need to be if you're thinking about sustainability. That said, there are a lot of different aspects and sectors of sustainability. If you're interested, I mean, part of the reason why we started this arts festival had to do with sustainability and building communities in Edinburgh. And it's about, you know, ethical fashion and ethical design. That's happening in London. You know, California, for example, is a really big place for sustainability. You look at anywhere on the west coast of the US, Seattle even, East Coast, maybe policy-wise, but not so much. And I think to answer your question, it's probably more about the culture in a country, because the US is such a broad, diverse country. And if you're in the West Coast, and I'm generalizing here, I'm sorry. If you're in the West Coast, it's sunny. You know, people are out in nature. They're hiking. They're more conscious of their footprint. They're more conscious of their impact on others. Maybe there's more space. You know, even if you're out in Montana or you're out in different parts of the U.S. that, you know, there's a conflict there. Okay, people might be a lot more conscious of the energy they use and their land because they're out in it more. But they might be more conservative politically, so maybe they're not accepting climate change as a thing, because that's still happening in the US. It's a very diverse place, so the answer is, yeah, on the West Coast, people are really environmentally conscious, and there are a lot of opportunities there. On the East Coast as well, there's a lot happening in a lot of different cultural capitals. If you're in a cosmopolitan city, people will know about sustainability and be interested in it, but I'm giving you a really big generalization, but that's my answer.
Eilidh, do you want to...
Yeah, I've been doing quite a lot of work in the US recently. I was over for a few weeks late last year, and I'm going for another few weeks in June. And I think what you're saying about the West Coast is that's the perception is it's all happening on the West Coast. So I went over with that, it's all happening on the West Coast, there's not really much on the East Coast, but there is a lot on the East Coast, and there's a lot of stuff, particularly in terms of waste management. There's a lot of legislation coming in on the East Coast in terms of mandating food waste recycling. For example, New York has, Boston has, well, the whole of Massachusetts has now, starting to mandate food waste recycling. So in terms of waste management, there's a lot of policy starting to kick in, and it's a really exciting time for waste management, definitely, if that's the kind of sustainability side you're interested in anyway.
Okay, we have... I've got two questions. Okay, great. So, gentleman over there, and then a lady over there. We'll maybe take both together, because we're beginning to run out of time. So if you ask your question, then you ask yours, and then we'll... Thank you.
Hi, this is a fairly open question, but what's your view on developing industries such as carbon offsetting?
Okay. So you mean carbon capture and storage and carbon offsetting?
I don't actually. I mean,
okay,
along the ideas of ways in which consumers can make an impact on sustainability in the environment. And one example of that which springs to mind is carbon offsetting, where you might effectively buy to plant a tree.
Okay, great, thanks.
Hi, I was just wanted to come back to the question about being memorable, and I'm doing a master in environmental sustainability, And the more I study, the more I feel like myself becoming more radical and thinking that we need bigger change, you know, real transformations. And I'm always a bit worried that people won't accept me if I try to be radical. So how radical can you be? How daring can you be, is my question.
Okay, two great questions. So what do we think about consumer power in terms of this? And maybe even related to that, how radical can we be? Come on, how radical can we be? Who wants to answer either or both of those?
I think we need transformational change. We need new society. So I think we've got to be radical. We're not going to achieve, even if you look at the Scottish government's targets, you know, we need 80% carbon emissions reduction by 2050. We need almost total decarbonisation of the energy supply, total decarbonisation of the heating supply, total decarbonisation of transport. We're not going to get there without being radical. So get to it. I think there's no question. You know, we're talking about massive change here. So, you know, forget caution. Let's do it. And it's much more exciting. It is so much more exciting because change is a very exciting business. I'm really not interested in carbon. I'm very interested in change. So let's go for change. That's the thing. Carbon offsetting, it's fine, but it's the last resort. And we should be working on much more interesting, much more radical solutions. We've got to change society.
Come off the fence,
Are we
Ben.
going down the line? Should we go down the line? To answer this question first, I mean, it's tough for me because I think technology can help us to a point, but I really am a purist when it comes to these type of things. And we talk a lot in sustainable development about technological fixes and whether or not they are actually effective. Technology is doing a lot. I know this isn't exactly your question, but I'm just thinking about, you're talking about new kind of inventions, innovations. Someone in Brighton invented fabric that absorbs CO2 out of the air. I don't know how it's disposed of, but it does. And if we can all start wearing T-shirts and clothes made out of this fabric, would we solve the issue of CO2 emissions? I don't know, but would it help? I'm sure. People have invented trees, fake trees that absorb CO2 out of the atmosphere. In terms of consumer power, we have massive power. The amount of water we use, energy we use, gas, everything. You know, don't forget that we are collectively contributing to this problem, and it's the small steps we make that will impact and affect change. Legislation needs to be part of that, and bigger investments need to be part of that. Some people feel that, you know, I'm just one person, what can I do? But you, every day you eat and sleep, are affecting the planet. Don't forget that. On radical, I wrote my dissertation on why radical environmentalism is counterproductive to achieving a sustainable future. And I wrote it because I was very upset about one thing. We need to be radical, and I think there's a difference between radical ideology and radical tactics. I think there's a time and place for radical tactics and they can be effective. But back to your question, people may not take you seriously. And I'm not saying you should sell out or you should dumb down what your beliefs are or your values. You have to remember who your audience is. And I think if you keep that in mind, be radical in your disposition and your values and your passion. We're not going to change this planet unless we're radical, but not everyone is there with us. And so I think you have to think about who you're interacting with in order to be effective and radical.
Reluctantly, I agree.
Yeah, me too. That's exactly what I was going to say as well. Be kind of radical but realistic at the same time. You know, if you're going in a job interview, don't go in super radical or they'll be like, nah. So yeah, be radical in your thoughts and your dreams and your passions kind of thing, but also be realistic and kind of what can be achieved.
Yeah, exactly the same point. On offsetting and consumer power, yeah, I guess not much said as well. We do have a lot of say. Every purchase is like a vote. You're voting if you're, you know, getting your clothes in a company that uses sweatshops. You vote okay for that. So people are ignorant a lot of the time, and the more conscious we are about the way things are produced and where they go when they become waste, the more change we can do as a society. So if you look at your carbon footprinting, you know, obviously lots of choices that you made you make as a consumer, they I don't know what proportion of the carbon footprint they come to. And then there's another part that's you kind of not really responsible for directly. That's your utilities. You don't really always get to choose how things come to you, how your roads are built. So that's legislation and systems and organizational action. So there's two parts of the story at least, if not more than that. But it's definitely not something to ignore. For offsetting, recently I was in a meeting with Department for Energy and Climate Change, and they were preparing for Lima and later for Paris negotiations, and they're looking into the possibilities of merging carbon markets, because it's a relatively new thing, this trading schemes of carbon permits, and it's apparently very complicated. And maybe there's a place for that. I'm not sure. It's not for me to say. I don't really know much. But the point, what I'm trying to say is that even if it gets developed to a workable and effective level, it will take a long time, as these things do. And in the meantime, we're getting warmer. So don't wait around, basically, for some solutions to come by. Some things you can already do now. So both, like, do stuff now and look into the future, be radical and be realistic at the same time. We need all sorts of things at the same time.
Well, I think to be a good radical and effective one, then you've got to be ready. And I would say, Burns was an effective radical because he could write good sentences. And that's what it is. If you can't write good sentences, then you're not going to be a very radical writer. And therefore, there are skills. So when you're doing your university course, these are the skills you are developing. And if you don't, in fact, develop those, then it doesn't matter how much you care about the environment, you'll be able to do very little about it. So it is not just how you think, it's what you've been educated and able to do.
Can I just finish off? Because I agree, as I say, reluctantly, but it's not completely reluctantly, because my brother is very successful at selling software, big software to companies all over the world. And he spends most of his time researching the company he's selling to. He does very little talking to them, and he finds out exactly what they're going to need. And I think if you're going to be a successful radical, you do need to know what the person is going to be open to listening to, and you need to get in there and work from within. So I would say you need those values. You need to make sure that you are being honest, as we heard earlier. You need to be clear about why you're going where you're going, and not fool people. But I think you need to be good at getting in there and getting into a position of influence. Okay,
I'm now literally standing between you and wine. I was going to say that doesn't work because I'm over here and you're over there. But you see what I mean. One quick comment from me, actually, on the very last two questions. One is that when you look at the number of companies in the top 100 and you compare them over time, they're always changing. So if you look back to the companies that the biggest companies in Britain in 1950, 1970, 1990, you'll see them moving through time, like ICI, for example. So if you'd said to people, even 30 years ago, ICI wouldn't exist, people would have been astonished. Now, that's because some of those companies, and Polaroid would be another one, some of these companies haven't responded. And I guess if we think that sustainability is one of the things they need to respond to, we do have some power, because they're always 1 year away from being bankrupt, effectively. So there is some power there. So I would also say as well that absolutely on that point about making change, I made a lot of changes before I arrived here in terms of environmental regulation. I have a confession to make. I'm an expert on environmental regulation. I find it very, really boring. It's really dull. I had no real interest in environmental regulation. I had an interest in making change to protect the environment. So I taught myself environmental regulation because that's the tools that I needed in order to make the change. And I agree with people. You have to be ready to make the change and speak the language. If you just shout at people about what should happen, some of them will listen, but some of them will say, what do you know about it? Come and work with me. So I would add that. Anyway, I need to wrap up. Can I first of all thank lots of people? Firstly, my colleagues in the Department for Social Responsibility and Sustainability, including Sarah on the camera, and Lucy, who's stepped out somewhere, who's helped organise the event. Also colleagues from the Careers Service and from Development and Alumni. It's great to work together on stuff. We have a couple of events that I should be mentioning as well. We do a series called Visions for Change. And if you're interested, the next one is called No Time to Waste, an Innovative Learning Week Salon on repurposing and upcycling. So if you want to know more, speak to me or one of my colleagues outside. And it's also, soon will be Fair Trade Fortnight, and there'll be lots of fascinating things happen during Fair Trade Fortnight. So again, look out for those. I want to thank the Edinburgh Centre for Carbon Innovation, who always host us, and they're always great, actually. They don't mind when I never manage to finish on time, and that means that they all have to stay late, so thank them. Particularly want to thank our speakers and our panel. I thought you were great, actually, and I wish I'd known some of the things that they were telling you. I think you should pay attention, because I wish I'd known them. It might have saved me quite a bit of time and heartache. And finally, thank you very much for coming. Actually, it's always a pleasure to have people turn out for one of our events, so thank you all very much, and can we thank our speakers?